Senator Elgeyo Marakwet, Kipchumba, Murkomen, MP Suba. We have John Mbadi with us. We'll be talking about the referendum calls, as well as 4 years on after the promulgation of the Constitution. It will be interesting to hear what the gentleman will have to say to that. But yesterday, as the birthday happened for the Constitution, 4-year birthday, our Ben Kitili got to sit down with one of the commissioners of the Commission for the Implementation of the Constitution, that's Kamotho Waiganjo, and here is an interview of what he had to say 4 years on after that promulgation, and as well the calls we are seeing from CORD, the Okoa Kenya campaign, as well as Pesa Mashinani. Here's that interview.
For most of the critical issues that the Constitution anticipated would be sorted out by now, the legal and institutional infrastructure is in place. That means that the laws that needed to be there are in place. The institutions that needed to have been set up have been set up. Some of them, there have been challenges in terms of their ability to commence their processes, but they are there in operation. The problem with these last set of bills, which are the ones that were due on the 4th anniversary, on August 26th, the problem with those is that many of them came very late in the process. We got them from the executive, most of them in the month of July, and some of them have very fundamental provisions. If you look at the public audit bill, we are changing our whole audit process to make it more transparent, more accountable. If you look at the procurement law, we are changing the procurement law to take into account the issue of preference for young people, people with disability, and how to ensure that we also have preferences in the counties. If you look at the laws relating to freedom of information and data protection, there are laws that one needs to be very, very careful. Laws to do with persons deprived of liberty, people who are in custody and who require certain rights under the Constitution. So the feeling was that the Parliament did not have sufficient time to process them within the deadline. But they had already actually been finalized by CIC, but they came very, very late. So that was part of the problem in this process. But generally, I would say that we have accomplished, in terms of the institutional infrastructure, we have accomplished what we needed to accomplish. I think I would say with regard to the bills that needed to be enacted by this time, which then there are about maybe 6-7 bills. All those bills have been prepared by the executive. Of course, there are other laws that Parliament would be happy to have. Those are not necessarily anniversary bills, or not necessarily required as a matter of the Constitution by this date, but Parliament would prefer to have them. So maybe that is where there's a push and pull between Parliament and the executive. I would say that there has been a challenge in terms of timelines. The executive has struggled sometimes to be able to produce, one, the policy framework, and then the legislation that is necessary, because some of these issues are very complex. Right now we are doing the policy on health and the health-related laws. These are very complex issues, so sometimes it's taken a little longer than people would have wanted. And so on the whole, I think the executive has tried, but they have to do better. Because especially with regard to policy, when you do not have a policy framework, a lot of the differences we are seeing even between institutions sometimes arise out of the absence of a policy framework. So we've been pushing the executive to ensure that the policies are in place. And I think that is where one significant challenge exists. The law can only take you so far. You know, there's only so much the law can do for you. And I think where we are as a country now, our problem is actually not the law. Our problem is not even the Constitution. Our problem is application. It is living to the values of the Constitution. When the Constitution talks about diversity, for example, the Constitution does not have to describe that you must have X number of people from this tribe, X number, because it is also not scientifically possible to do that. It assumes that we will apply what are reasonable rules that favor the spirit of the Constitution. We have sometimes forgotten that the Constitution has a value, and sometimes we want to obey the letter, but we forget the spirit of it. So I think that is where the challenge is, respecting the spirit and values of the Constitution, applying it in the way the Constitution intended to be adopted. The problem is no longer a matter of law. The reality is that there are areas where there have been benefits. I have been around, for example, 20, 30 counties, maybe about 26 counties personally, and I can tell you that there are counties you go and you notice there's a difference. There are places people have never seen the public service work. There are places you've never seen health services. Yes, they are struggling, but in many places there have been benefits. Are they the way Kenyans are entitled to them? Of course not. We are way, way below where Kenyans should and are entitled to. Are we better than where we were? I believe so in many cases. Are we headed in the right direction? Yes. Are there challenges? Yes. Remember at the end of the day that part of our challenge is also even the people that we have either elected or appointed to run our offices. Where we elected people who do not have the competencies or the capacity to, then we are paying a heavy price. But I think for me the good thing is that it is saying to Kenyans that there is a connection between who you elect and the nature of services that you're entitled to get. So if that helps Kenyans take their responsibility for elections a little more seriously, it will be good for this country. One is to say that the Constitution gives a right for people to hold a referendum. So it is a constitutional right and it needs to be protected. And we need to affirm that there's nothing wrong with having a referendum. Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with having Kenyans are entitled. We must, however, be careful to remember that the 2010 Constitution is probably the first time that Kenyans, as a collegiate, together, agreed on a document together. And it is important that we protect the gains in that Constitution even as we seek to amend. The danger of the process of amending at this point is that no one can guarantee that even as we amend so-called to correct, that we will not take away, claw back on some of the gains we had. And the danger is that we would be thinking that we are amending to improve and we actually go backwards. So that is the danger. Number two is that the reality is that most of the issues we are talking about are actually not issues that need amendment. It is issues in which the Constitution already has an answer. What we have done is we have not been energetic and innovative in using the answers within the Constitution. So we need to first say, in all the 10 issues that people are talking about, first question, do they take us forward or do they take us backwards? Those taking us backwards, remove them. Second set of questions, do they have answers within the Constitution? If they have answers within the Constitution, let us implement them. Number three, the ones that don't have answers in the Constitution, can we find them in the law without amending the Constitution? Let us amend the law. Number four, those that remain, that now require a constitutional amendment, let us ensure that the issues we are raising are issues, one, on which Kenyans are generally united, and two, issues which improve the Constitution. Because the danger is that if we subject this Constitution to a political win or lose, it will mean that we also lose the legitimacy of the Constitution as a uniting document. It will now be owned by X as opposed to the other. That cannot be good for the Constitution. The beauty of this Constitution is that every Kenyan identifies as their Constitution. The minute we amend it to respect the whims of X or Y, and remember everybody wants to clamor for it, it will mean that the Constitution now starts to be identified as a win for X and a loss for Y. That cannot be good for the growth of constitutionalism. These are major issues. This country has major challenges. Are those challenges of the Constitution? Are challenges in governance issues of the Constitution? Are challenges of service deliveries of the Constitution? Are the challenges of inequity in resource distribution issues of the Constitution? I would posit most of them no. The Constitution has answered most of those questions. Our failure is that we have not implemented. So what we should be discussing, how do we ensure that we implement, not how do we change?
All right, there, Kamotho Waiganjo, Commissioner with the CIC. That interview was with Ben 4 years on after the promulgation of the Constitution. And with me in studio, Elgeyo Marakwet, Senator Kipchumba Murkomen, as well as MP Suba John Mbadi. Thank you both for coming this morning. I'll begin with you, Senator. Your thoughts on the position that the Commission of the Implementation for the Constitution is taking at this particular time. They feel it's not doing too badly, the Constitution, 4 years on.
Oh, definitely. One would have expected so many challenges. Of course, we have had the challenges, but really, for me, there is a lot that we have gained. And starting with even putting in place institutions of governance, particularly at the county level.
Right.
The fact that we can talk today about a county assembly in a particular area is doing this and that, including even the alcohol bill. However, even if we fold the merits, the fact that those institutions are in place and running is a great achievement, that the county governments, the governor has a county executive and has offices and it's running. Because even in the constitution itself, it was envisaged that it would take 3 years for functions to be devolved, for those institutions to start working. But you can imagine that all the functions have now been devolved. Of course, there is still a lot of legislation that we in Parliament have to work on to facilitate that. But for me, that is a great achievement. Even at the national level, readjusting government from what used to be a centralized system of government to a situation where the ministries are accepting that certain functions do not belong to them. Well, as you know, happened in a very short time, but of course there is also a lot of work to be done going forward. You find that even the presidency to adjust to that level of the system that you have to always consult and cooperate, you know, there's a lot of that has happened. Even Parliament itself, National Assembly is still struggling to believe that there's another house called Senate. But so far, the first 1 year we had a problem, including even we had to go to Supreme Court. The second year we've done very well. The bills of division revenue, allocation revenue had to move between the both houses. And there's a lot of goodwill now happening between the two houses in terms of passage of bills. But of course, suspicion still there. So sometimes it is labeled here that supremacy, but it's basically about adjusting the new institutions that have come to place and working together with the old wine, and you have old wine skins in some situations, and we have to really continue adjusting in that regard. Okay. One thing that the Commission has made a very good assessment is that perhaps there was a reason why we said 5 years of implementation of the Constitution, so that then when we are even saying, because there's a committee, National Assembly, that says we want to audit the Constitution, I think the auditing should be happening towards the end, not in the, at this point in time, in my own opinion, but also that even those who are clamoring for amendments should wait a little bit. We finish this 5 years of transition, then we'll be able to move forward. The place we have failed terribly is the implementation of Article 6.2 that says that there must be consultation and cooperation between both levels of government, but also among institutions. I have seen situations where they're just bickering for the sake of bickering. There is conflict, there is confrontation. We should be, even between us and National Assembly, we should be having more consultation.
So there's a struggle.
There's a struggle of accepting the argument that the norm that should come forward is consulted. Let me give you a very quick example. Council of Governors the other day were unable to get money because of the delays of the bills between the two houses and the amendment the National Assembly put in place, which we have to come back to reconsider. And the first thing they did was to address a press conference, only to realize the following day that if they had walked to the Treasury and consult and cooperate, the next day they are announcing. Because if you are a governor and you are running lives of people, medical doctors, people who are giving service to the people, there are things that you must not do that shows lack of confidence, that puts panic in them, because you must provide certain level of leadership. Only for a day after to say, oh yeah, kumbe,
it's been sorted. Let's hear from you, Mr. MP, because this has been 4 years on. Of course, you're part of the coalition that's pushing for the changes. But in as far as the entire document and the laws in it, the process so far in the implementation.
First of all, let me take this opportunity to apologize to our viewers for I'm not in the best of health this morning, but I hope I'll be audible enough. Now, first of all, let me say that I agree with Waiganjo to some extent, that really we have made some progress in terms of implementation of the Constitution. I do know that all the institutions that were required to be set up have actually been set up. As to whether they are operating properly is now another question that we need to, going forward, to discuss. But so far, we have the institutions. We have also passed a good number of legislations. I remember, I think now we have passed over 50 legislations. We still have about 30 to go to really make this document a living document. However, I must point out that the progress has not been as expected. In my view, I think we did much better in the last the 2 years of the Constitution before the life of the last government come to an end. But we've not done so well since this government came into place. A lot of it, I think, because of lack of goodwill, the support from the government that is required. That is, read executive and also legislature. We need to nurture, a young baby needs constant and continuous nurturing. That has been lacking. And whereas I agree that we have in our constitution what can be perceived as 5 years of transition, but the constitution does really not talk about giving this constitution 5 years before any amendment. And it is a little bit shocking to me when my brother here at the Senate and my friend talks about we needed 5 years. I think the first person to call for amendment of the constitution was him. Now that time he felt that his power as a senator was threatened, and he felt so agitated and called for amendment of the constitution. Now that he feels he's comfortable, maybe having discussed at the levels of Jubilee, and they have agreed that now his powers as a senator is not threatened. I think he's now not seeing the sense of why we should amend the constitution. But in a nutshell, for me, constitution was done by Kenyans. And where I don't agree with Kamodo is where he says that Kenyans passed this constitution after consultation. Yes, that is correct. And that is why we are not advocating for parliamentary initiative. We are advocating for a popular initiative, which is going to involve the people of Kenya. The same people of Kenya who spoke in 2010 are the same ones we want to speak to particular articles where we feel a lot of improvement is still needed.
Okay.
Yes.
So where did the change of heart take place, Senator?
I think first of all, I was the first person, or the Senate even collectively, but I was very vocal in the desire to do a referendum to sort out, because we were being frustrated by National Assembly, particularly Mbadi, and Mbadi as a person, not even as a collective, whatever. If you go to the Hansard, it was extremely irritating last year. And you know, he's my friend because we used to work together when he was a member of parliament, and I was in the task force on devolved government working on the legislation, so he's my friend for a long time. But you know, there is a quote from the Bible that Paul says, when I was a baby, I used to drink milk. But when you grow of age, you start, you know, biting even meat with boards. You know, the naivety of just having come to parliament and thinking that the only way to solve problems is to take it back to the people, even where people have told you to go and solve it. But over time, when you go through the constitution and look at what was happening, even after I sat down, as a chair of devolved government committee, if we went for a referendum last year, we could not be talking of counties in the manner we are talking about now. Some people would have brought in certain amendments that are going to be injurious. Others, there would be situations where the other counties would just stand still. And let me tell you, if we go to referendum today, there are a number of counties who are doing nothing now. They are struggling to even spend 20% of the money to development. Now add to the fact that a governor and MCS of that county are busy campaigning, running affairs of politics and voting and so forth. The most affected institution will be the baby institutions that Mbadi has acknowledged that they still need milk. They are supposed to be fed. They are still tied to the umbilical cord of national government, as the constitution says, because it's transition. It's still capacity building. So I made that decision consciously for the best interest of the county governments. That was actually in my mind. But two, and most important, that for you to amend a constitution that took almost 20 years to gain, there must be a higher input of consultation and participation. If you look at the clamor for referendum now, you can see everybody's extremely disinterested.
Civil society was part of that. So some political parties,
civil society, parties, there was, you know, excitement all over. But if you look at it now, this clamor for amendments, it split the country. You know, you can see few churches are thinking about participating. Civil society is disinterested. You will find that many of the actors are disinterested because the motives that is driving us to amend the constitution at the moment is to assist in court to get back to office. But
the issues that have been raised, Senator, do they not merit change in as far as the challenges the country is now grappling with?
Give me an example.
The question of devolution, more funds to the counties.
More funds to the counties. The argument which has been made has been occasioned by Mbadi and group. The question of that auditing of accounts is about 5 years ago, that the money, but my concern is not that the money which has gone to counties is less because the auditing of accounts has been delayed. My situation would be this. In about 1 trillion, of 900, I think, billion of the shareable revenue, is it visible that you can increase the amount of money that goes to the counties without transferring certain functions? Yeah, I mean, let's go practical. If we say education has to go, because some people are saying the hardware, the software remains and so forth. If education goes with the teachers, it will be very easy. But look at the teachers now. They talk about increase of salary, you know, all these issues. Can counties be able to deal with that if they're still even struggling now to adapt to the question of health? Let me share the example of health. At the moment, one of the biggest challenges of the doctors is not even the salary. It's not even the allowances. It is mobility. Suddenly, the doctors have realized, the nurses and medical practitioners, that if devolution found you in Homa Bay, and you had hoped that you will move from Homa Bay to Elgeyo Marakwet in another 2 or 3 years using the transfer system, now you are locked in Homa Bay County because you are just employed by one government at the county. You can't even move to the next county without that county advertising for a job, without the mobility of staff from one county to another is just a nightmare.
But why?
But these are transitional implementation issues that we must be dealing with fast before we tell people to go for a referendum.
First of all, I don't think the Senate is right to say that even with the current functions that have already been transferred to the counties, that the amount that is allocated today is enough. The senator is very much aware, unless it's forgotten, that the body that has been tasked with the responsibility of calculating how much should be devolved to counties to follow functions, because the Constitution talks about resources should follow functions. Even with the current functions as they are, to maintain minimum required level of service delivery to counties, you require 276 billion. And that is the calculation from CRA. Now, what came from the first bill was 238 billion from the Treasury. That amount has since come to 226 billion. I know it was the National Assembly which reduced that.
Yes.
And I'm not here to speak on behalf of National Assembly. My position was very clear on this. If you go to the Hansard, and I don't want to go to take us there, and Murkomen knows very well that Jubilee has majority in National Assembly and the Senate. If they want to pass the correct amount, they would do it. Now, what we want now is a situation where we don't leave the counties at the mercy of other politicians, the National Assembly, the Senate. We want to provide enough resources to counties. We don't need to rely on goodwill. The counties relying on goodwill is something that is not working. You can see what the defender of the devolution is talking. He's saying the money that is given, for us to add more money, we need to add more functions. Far from it, the current functions given to counties, the amount allocated is not sufficient to perform those functions. I want to give you an example. Last financial year, Homa Bay County was given 1.7 billion to pay staff.
Would you oppose?
To pay staff. Just listen to me. I did not oppose any additional fund. Actually, don't misrepresent facts, Murkomen. What I oppose, and I still stand by my word, is that the division of revenue bill should have not gone to the Senate. It is the chaos we are in. Today, if that was sorted out, we would be having County Allocation of Revenue Act. We don't have it because of that confusion. We are to take unnecessarily too long to fight over 1.8 billion. Really, is that what we need as a country? But anyway, I wanted to make a point.
Yes.
And the point here is not what the National Assembly is saying, the Senate is saying. The point is, do we need more resources to the county? And this is what I'm saying. Homa Bay County got only 1.7 billion for paying staff salary. The actual cost came to 2.2 billion. That amount was, I would say, forcefully recovered from the by the national government from Homa Bay County allocation. Which activities then was hurt? The development. So you removed close to 400 million to pay salaries.
So your argument is not necessarily that there needs to be more functions to get more money.
No. The current functions devolved to the counties
require more money.
In themselves require more money, and there is no goodwill to give counties more money. And we are saying, let us give it by law.
Yeah, so why should they rely on that?
Can I respond to that? First of all, allocation of resources, both at the county and national level, is political organization. The role of Senate National Assembly is to ensure that there is enough money that's going to the counties. But most importantly, forget even about that, the Senate, including myself as the chair of the Devolved Government Committee, pushed for 238 billion to go to the county. It was impossible to deal with some members, including Mbadi, to accept that you could move from 270. Let me tell you the reason.
That's not correct.
The reason is basically because these MPs are looking at their CDF, which I'm not opposed to, because CDF is also taking money back closer to the people. Yeah. If you look at my role in moving the money from 217 to 226, I had even to go and sit with the president and the team that was negotiating this issue to take it to 226. And even after we say 226 and 3 billion to go to referral hospitals, National Assembly even refused again. And that's why they slashed the money to half, 1.8. So the money going to counties, and it's on record for some of us, is not enough. And the same way we are saying the money even for running national government is not enough. The question we should be asking ourselves is this, that should we be going to referendum to add money in a process that can be dealt with by the two houses? Two, and most important, should the counties also be doing something to attract investments, to collect the taxes that are required to attract? Why are we only debating about sharing the money? We are not debating about backing the resources itself.
So your argument is the money in itself is not enough?
It's not enough. It can't. Even in your own house, but however much money you are given, it's not enough. But our initial position as, because there's a problem in this country that everything that requires, when we have a problem with something, we should amend the law and have, that is why we have the most detailed constitution, and we want to increase those details. What it only requires is the negotiation between levels of government. Last, in every federalized system of government, like United States and the like, you remember the other day Obama's budget almost collapsed. Budgeting process, allocation of resources, development initiatives in any system of government is a function of negotiation between levels of government. That's why I opposed to the capping of county assemblies' resources.